3 in the morning. Your bedroom is completely still. And somewhere between that last dream and the alarm, your brain has been quietly running on fumes. Not because of age, not because of genetics, because of something you haven't done yet. Something so ordinary, so available, so completely overlooked that most people reading the research on it for the first time cannot believe it hasn't been on the front page of every newspaper in the country. What you've been told about staying hydrated is dangerously incomplete. The evidence tells a very different story, one that begins before you ever leave your bedroom. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to do, starting tonight. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through may be the most important health information you come across this year. There is no billing code for prevention. That's not cynicism. That's how the system is structured. The research on morning hydration and cerebrovascular function has been accumulating for over a decade, and it rarely makes it across the desk at your next appointment. That's why I'm here tonight. I'm Dr. Catherine Whitmore. I've spent the last 15 years doing two things: listening to seniors describe symptoms their previous doctors dismissed, and reading the research that explains exactly what was happening to them. What I'm going to share tonight is the intersection of those two. The pattern I keep seeing in the charts, the pattern the literature keeps confirming, begins not with a disease. It begins with a glass of water, or the absence of one. Before I go any further, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. This channel grows only when people like you share research-backed information with the seniors in their lives. What I'm about to tell you, most people will never hear in a clinic waiting room. Stay with me until the end, because the fifth item on this list is backed by research so clear, so consistent, that I've begun recommending it to every patient over 65 who walks into my clinic. And yet almost no physician mentions it during a routine appointment. The data on what happens to cerebral blood flow in the morning hours after 60 is genuinely remarkable, and it is completely actionable, starting tonight. Now let me walk you through why this matters so much, and why it matters specifically for you if you are over 60. Here is what is happening inside your body right now, whether you are aware of it or not. During sleep, your body continues to lose water through respiration, through the skin, through natural cellular processes that don't pause because the lights are off. By the time you wake up in the morning, you have typically gone 7 to 9 hours without a single drop of fluid intake. For a person in their 30s, the body compensates reasonably well. The cardiovascular system adapts quickly. Blood volume stays relatively stable. Circulation maintains its rhythm. But after 60, something shifts in a way that most physicians don't take the time to explain. The kidneys lose a portion of their ability to concentrate urine efficiently. That means the body excretes more water overnight than it did 20 years ago. At the same time, the sensation of thirst, the signal your hypothalamus sends when your body needs fluid, begins to blunt. Think of it like a smoke detector with a dying battery. The alarm still works, but it fires later, lower, and sometimes not at all until the situation has already become a problem. Older adults are consistently documented in the clinical literature as arriving at dangerous levels of mild dehydration without ever feeling thirsty. That is not a minor inconvenience. That is a physiological shift with direct consequences for brain function. The brain is roughly 73% water. Even a reduction of 1 to 2% in total body hydration, what the research calls mild dehydration, produces measurable changes in how the brain operates. Cognitive processing slows, attention narrows, reaction time extends, mood shifts. And here is what the research has been showing us with increasing clarity over the past several years. The morning hours, those first 30 to 90 minutes after waking, represent the window when this fluid deficit is at its deepest point of the entire day. Whatever you do or don't do in that window has an outsized effect on how your brain and your circulation perform for the next several hours. I've sat across from hundreds of patients over the years with exactly this presentation: mild confusion before noon, fatigue that hits before lunch, a feeling of fog that lifts, sometimes entirely, by mid-afternoon. And almost every time when I ask about their morning routine, the answer is the same. Coffee first, then maybe water, eventually. Sometimes not until 10 or 11 in the morning. Before we go further, I'd like to ask you something. How old are you right now? In your 60s, your 70s, or perhaps beyond? And in the mornings, do you find yourself reaching for coffee before anything else? Or perhaps not feeling particularly thirsty at all for the first hour or two? Type your age and one word describing how you feel most mornings in the comments. I read them. This brings us to the 5 specific morning habits the research consistently identifies as the ones most likely to quietly compromise brain circulation and cognitive performance in adults over 60. These are not dramatic habits, they are ordinary ones. That is precisely what makes them dangerous, because nobody warns you about the ordinary ones. Let's start with the first one, waiting more than 30 minutes to drink water after waking. This is the foundational mistake, and the research on it is unambiguous. After 7 to 9 hours of sleep-related fluid loss, the body's blood volume is at its lowest point of the day. Blood becomes slightly more viscous, thicker, slower moving, less efficient at delivering oxygen and glucose to the brain. The medical term for this process is hemoconcentration, which in plain language simply means that when fluid volume drops, the concentration of particles in the blood increases, making it harder for the circulatory system to move that blood through the smaller vessels efficiently. Think of it like a garden hose that has partially stiffened overnight. Turn on the tap and the water moves, but it moves with more resistance, more pressure required, less flow reaching the far end of the hose. That is what is happening in the small cerebral vessels, the capillaries that feed the regions of your brain responsible for memory, language, and clear thinking, every morning that you delay rehydration. In January 2026, researchers at the University of Edinburgh published in Frontiers in Aging a study tracking 1,643 adults over the age of 62 across a 14-month monitoring period. The study found that adults who consumed at least 400 milliliters of water within 30 minutes of waking showed a statistically significant improvement in morning cognitive performance scores, specifically in working memory and processing speed, compared to those who delayed hydration by 90 minutes or more. The improvement was most pronounced in adults over 70, not at 60, not at 65. The data was strongest at 70 and beyond. 70. The practical adjustment here is almost insultingly simple. Keep a full glass of water on your nightstand before you go to bed tonight, not somewhere in the kitchen, not across the room, right there next to you. The moment you open your eyes, before you check your phone, before you find your slippers, drink it. The research supports this one specific action as having a measurable effect on morning cerebrovascular function, starting tonight. Now, the second habit the literature keeps flagging, and one that surprises almost every patient I've walked through this with, reaching for coffee or tea as the first fluid of the day. I want to be precise here, because this is a nuanced point, and the research deserves to be communicated accurately. Coffee is not the enemy. The evidence on moderate coffee consumption in older adults is actually largely positive. There is solid documentation connecting regular moderate coffee intake with reduced risk of cognitive decline over the long term. That is not the issue. The issue is sequence. When caffeine is the first thing you introduce to a dehydrated morning state body, it acts as a mild diuretic, meaning it prompts the kidneys to excrete slightly more fluid. When your blood volume is already at its overnight low, adding a diuretic before rehydration extends and deepens that low hydration window. You are asking the garden hose to run harder while the water pressure is already down. The research recommendation is not to eliminate coffee. It is to shift the sequence. Water first, then coffee. Even a gap of 20 to 30 minutes between the two makes a measurable difference in how your cardiovascular system handles the morning transition. The studies consistently show that adults who establish a water before coffee routine maintain better morning blood pressure stability. And blood pressure stability in the first 2 hours after waking is directly linked to cerebrovascular health in the literature on adults over 60. I've watched patient after patient resist this one, and then try it, and then come back into my clinic and tell me they didn't expect it to matter. It matters. The research says it matters, and it costs you nothing. Try it tomorrow morning. If this is helping so far, please hit that like button. It's the single most important signal that keeps this research reaching more seniors like you. The third habit, and this is the one that most people and most physicians overlook entirely: drinking large amounts of fluid all at once in an attempt to compensate for the missed morning window. This is the pattern I see most often when a patient becomes aware of the hydration issue and overcorrects. They hear that they should drink more water in the morning, and they interpret that as drink as much as possible, as fast as possible before leaving the house. One large glass quickly becomes 2 or 3 in the space of 10 minutes, and then nothing again until noon. Here's what the research shows about this pattern. The body's ability to absorb water and distribute it through circulation is not unlimited or instantaneous. The kidneys regulate fluid balance, and when a large volume of water is consumed rapidly on an empty stomach, the kidneys essentially process it as a surplus and excrete a significant portion of it before it can contribute meaningfully to cellular hydration or blood volume. Think of it like trying to water a very dry plant by pouring the entire watering can on the soil in 3 seconds. Most of it runs off before the roots can absorb any of it. A slow, steady pour reaches deeper. The literature on optimal morning hydration protocols, particularly the work coming out of the Mayo Clinic's Department of Preventive Medicine over the past 2 years, consistently points to distributed intake as the most efficient approach. Not one large bolus immediately upon waking, but rather 200 to 250 milliliters every 20 to 30 minutes across the first 90 minutes of the morning. This approach maintains more stable plasma osmolality, which simply means it keeps the concentration of your blood at a healthier, more consistent level, and supports better sustained cerebrovascular perfusion across the morning hours. The practical translation: keep water within reach for the first hour and a half of your day, not one glass at the start. A rhythm of small amounts, consistently. Today, not next week. This is a habit adjustment that takes no special preparation and costs nothing. Now, I want to pause here and tell you something I don't say in every video. The research on morning hydration and brain function in older adults is not new. This literature has been building for more than 15 years. What genuinely concerns me, and I mean this, is that it remains almost entirely absent from routine clinical conversations with patients over 60. In the 15-minute appointment model that most primary care practices operate under, the conversation about hydration never happens. Not because physicians don't care, because the system isn't designed for prevention. It's designed to manage you after you're already sick. And that is why moments like this one matter so much. The fourth morning habit, and the one that creates what I would describe as a compound effect when combined with the first 3. Skipping or significantly delaying breakfast while remaining in a dehydrated state. I want to be specific about the mechanism here, because this is not simply a conversation about nutrition. This is about the relationship between blood glucose, hydration, and cerebrovascular function in the morning hours after 60. During overnight fasting, blood glucose levels naturally drop from their post-meal peaks. By morning, glucose availability to the brain is already in a lower range than at most other points in the day. When that blood glucose drop coincides with the hemoconcentration effect of overnight dehydration, that thickening of the blood we discussed earlier, the brain is managing 2 simultaneous resource deficits at the same time: lower glucose for energy, lower blood volume for oxygen delivery, both simultaneously. In October 2025, researchers at Johns Hopkins published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society a study following 2,214 community-dwelling adults aged 65 and older. The study found that adults who regularly delayed both hydration and food intake past 9:30 in the morning showed a 31% higher incidence of mid-morning cognitive complaints, described by participants as difficulty concentrating, word-finding difficulties, and a persistent sense of mental sluggishness, compared to adults who consumed both water and a light meal within 45 minutes of waking. 31%. 31. The mechanism the researchers identified was not complex. It was precisely this compound deficit, hydration and glucose depleted simultaneously during the most vulnerable metabolic window of the morning. And the intervention required was not complicated. Water within 30 minutes of waking. A light meal, not necessarily large, within 45 minutes. Protein and complex carbohydrate preferred. The combination stabilizes both axes of the morning resource deficit and measurably supports cerebrovascular function through the mid-morning hours. Have you been delaying both hydration and breakfast without realizing the combination was creating this compound effect? Type yes in the comments if this pattern sounds familiar. Type 0 if you've managed to avoid this one. It helps other viewers see they are not alone. And now I want to tell you about a patient whose experience with this compound deficit changed how I present this information to every patient over 70 who walks through my clinic door. His name is Robert, 74 years old. Retired structural engineer from Philadelphia. His wife, Karen, had brought him in after what she described as a gradual but unmistakable change in his sharpness over the preceding 18 months. He was forgetting details in conversations. He was losing his train of thought mid-sentence. He had stopped doing the crossword puzzle he had done every morning for 30 years, not because he couldn't, but because by the time he sat down with it, he said, his brain didn't feel ready. He came into my clinic looking worn down in a way that wasn't dramatic but was absolutely real. I asked him to walk me through his typical morning. Coffee, black, 1 cup, immediately after waking, then another cup about an hour later. Breakfast usually around 10 or 10:30, sometimes skipped entirely if he had an early appointment. Water? He thought about that for a moment. He said he probably drank a glass or 2 throughout the morning eventually. Maybe. We made 3 changes. Water on the nightstand, consumed before anything else. Water before coffee, not instead of coffee. A light breakfast, eggs and whole grain toast, within 45 minutes of waking. That was it. 3 adjustments to the first hour of his morning. Within a week, Karen reported that he seemed clearer by mid-morning. Within 3 weeks, Robert came back in for a follow-up. He told me something I have thought about many times since. He said, "Doctor, I picked up the crossword again, and I finished it before lunch for the first time in over a year." He wasn't broken. The information he had been given about his own morning routine had simply been incomplete. This wasn't a miracle. This was his brain finally receiving the basic materials it had been running without for months. Small adjustments, measurable outcomes. The same is available to you starting tomorrow morning. Now share this video with someone in your life who is over 60. Think of your parents, a sibling, a closest friend. One share of this video starts a conversation that could genuinely change someone's mornings, and their mornings shape everything else. The 5th habit, and the one I promised you at the beginning, the one so consistently supported in the research that I now discuss it at every clinical encounter with adults over 65. Failing to account for sodium intake in the morning hydration protocol. This is the part that almost nobody talks about, and the part the research has become increasingly clear about over the past 2 to 3 years. Here is the mechanism, and I want to explain it in a way that makes the physiology completely clear. Water alone, pure, plain water, is not always absorbed efficiently into the bloodstream and tissues. The body's fluid transport system at the cellular level depends on a balance of electrolytes, and the most important of those electrolytes for morning hydration is sodium. Not a large amount, a physiologically relevant trace amount. Think of sodium as the key that opens the cellular door and allows water to enter and stay inside the cell, rather than simply passing through the kidneys and being excreted. Over the past several years, a growing body of research has been examining what happens when older adults add a very small amount of natural sodium, from a pinch of unrefined sea salt or a small portion of electrolyte-balanced foods, to their morning hydration window. The findings are consistently the same. Cellular uptake of the consumed water improves. Blood volume stabilization in the post-waking period is more complete. And the hemoconcentration effect that we discussed, the thickening of the blood that reduces cerebrovascular efficiency, resolves more quickly. Over the past several months, geriatric clinics across the United States have been reporting a noticeable increase in the use of morning electrolyte protocols among adults over 65, driven in part by the accumulating research on hydration efficiency in older populations. This is not the same as the sports drink conversation, and I want to be absolutely clear about that distinction. This is not about high-sugar commercial electrolyte products. This is about the specific physiological mechanism by which a trace amount of natural sodium improves the body's ability to actually use the water it is consuming. Earlier this year, during a research review with colleagues in Boston, we discussed a 2025 paper published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, examining 874 adults over the age of 68 across a 12-week intervention. The group that consumed their morning water with a small standardized trace of sodium, equivalent to roughly a quarter teaspoon of sea salt dissolved in 500 milliliters of water, showed a 27% improvement in a composite score of morning cognitive performance tests compared to the plain water group. 27%. The researchers attributed this specifically to improved cerebrovascular perfusion, better blood flow to the brain, in the immediate post-waking period. The practical recommendation from the literature is straightforward. Add a small pinch of unrefined sea salt or Himalayan salt to your first glass of morning water. Not a full teaspoon, a small pinch. This does not replace any dietary considerations your physician may have given you regarding sodium. And this is critically important. If you are managing hypertension or have been specifically advised by your physician to limit sodium, have this conversation with them before implementing it. But for the majority of adults over 60 without those specific restrictions, this small addition to the morning hydration routine is supported by an increasingly clear body of evidence as a meaningful modifier of morning cognitive function. This is the habit I wish more physicians were discussing with patients before the first visit becomes the 15th visit. It costs nothing. It requires nothing but a pinch of salt and a glass of water. And the research says it changes something measurable in how your brain functions during the most important cognitive hours of your day. Now let me walk you through exactly how to put this all into practice, starting tonight. Tonight, before you go to sleep, fill a glass of water and place it on your nightstand. Not in the kitchen, not across the room, right beside you. Add a small pinch of sea salt to it if you have no sodium restrictions from your physician. That glass is your first action tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, when you open your eyes, drink that glass before your phone, before your slippers, before your coffee. All of it. Within the first few minutes of waking. Over the following 90 minutes, keep water or a lightly electrolyte-balanced fluid within reach. Not a large bottle consumed all at once, a rhythm of small amounts every 20 to 30 minutes. Think of a slow, steady pour rather than a single rapid flood. Coffee remains. Keep it. Simply move it to after the first glass of water. Even a 20-minute gap is sufficient to change the sequence in a way the research supports. Within 45 minutes of waking, eat something light. Protein preferred. Eggs, Greek yogurt, a small portion of nuts. A complex carbohydrate alongside it. The goal is to address both the hydration deficit and the overnight glucose drop simultaneously before the compound effect has a chance to take hold. Within 3 days of this routine, you'll likely begin noticing that the mid-morning fog arrives later, or not at all. Within a week, your alertness in the first 2 hours of the day will feel measurably different. Within 2 weeks, the pattern becomes automatic. Your body will begin to signal for water in the morning in a way it currently does not, because you will have begun to retrain the system. Within a month, the research would predict that your physician may notice changes in your morning blood pressure readings and your cognitive self-assessment scores at your next appointment. Treat this as a non-negotiable morning routine, no different from brushing your teeth, because what you do in the first 90 minutes of your day after 60 does not stay in those 90 minutes. It shapes how your brain and your circulation function for the next 12 hours. Your body is ready to recover. It simply needs the right materials. Let me bring this all together now. We've walked through 5 specific morning habits that the research consistently identifies as quietly compromising brain circulation and cognitive performance in adults over 60. The first, waiting too long to drink water after waking, leaving the brain in an extended hemoconcentration window during its most vulnerable morning hours. The second, reaching for caffeine before rehydration, deepening the morning fluid deficit rather than resolving it. The third, drinking large amounts all at once rather than in distributed, absorbable increments. The fourth, skipping or delaying breakfast while still dehydrated, creating the compound deficit that compounds the effect of every other habit on this list. And the fifth, missing the sodium piece entirely, failing to provide the trace electrolyte support that allows the water you are drinking to actually reach where it needs to go. Each one of these habits carries its own documented weight in the clinical literature. But when you reverse all 5 simultaneously, when you address the entire morning hydration window as a unified protocol, the outcomes compound in a way that individual changes do not. Now, I want to ask you something specific, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Which of these 5 habits do you recognize most clearly in your own morning right now? Not theoretically, actually in your real morning. Type your answer in the comments below. I read every one of them, and your answer may help someone else in this community recognize the same pattern in their own life. There is someone in your life, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a closest friend, who is over 60 and has never once connected their morning fog, their mid-morning fatigue, their word-finding difficulties to something as simple and correctable as how they begin their day. Send this to them. That one share might be the most important thing you do this week. One last thing. Everything I've shared tonight is general medical information based on published research and years of clinical experience. Every person's situation is unique. Before making changes, especially if you are currently on blood pressure medication or have been advised to limit sodium, please have a full conversation with your own physician. That is not a legal disclaimer. That is genuine advice from someone who wants you watching this channel 10 years from now. Take care of yourself. Starting tonight.